It was supposed to be a peaceful Saturday morning, just a quick fishing trip out on the lake, something they'd done a dozen times before. The sun had barely peeked over the hills when 32-year-old Emily Harper packed up her truck with sandwiches, extra sunscreen, and her 8-year-old daughter Lily's favorite fishing rod. The plan was simple: mother and daughter time, away from phones, work emails, and the noise of everyday life. Emily was the kind of mom who believed in creating memories over things. And for her, these little weekend escapes were everything. Locals remembered seeing them drive out that morning. Emily, always smiling, waved at the gas station clerk while Lily pressed her face to the window, watching the sky turn pink. It was one of those warm, early summer days that makes everything feel possible. The lake they were headed to, Stillwater Lake, wasn't the most popular spot, but it was quiet, deep, and surrounded by trees that made it feel like their own secret hideaway. For Emily, it was perfect. No crowds, no distractions. Just her and Lily, with the soft ripple of water and the promise of a good catch. But that evening, when Emily's truck never returned, the mood shifted. At first, friends and family assumed they'd stayed out late, maybe caught in traffic or enjoying the sunset. But as night fell and there was still no sign of them, worry crept in. By the next morning, search and rescue teams were combing the lake. Boats, helicopters, dogs, they all focused on one place, the patch of water where Emily was last seen. Her truck was found parked neatly near the trailhead. Inside were their backpacks, a half-eaten lunch, and Lily's tablet, still playing her favorite cartoon on silent mode. But of Emily and Lily, there was no trace. The lake was searched for weeks. Divers went down dozens of times. Sonar scans were done, but the water, nearly 60 feet deep in some places, held its silence. Rumors began to spread. Some said it was an accident, a capsized boat, maybe a sudden storm. Others whispered darker theories. But no evidence pointed in any clear direction. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air. 8 months passed. The seasons changed. Snow covered the edges of Stillwater and then melted again. People moved on, but the memory of Emily and Lily never truly faded, especially not in their small town. A memorial was set up near the lake's edge, where a photo of the two smiling together fluttered in the breeze. Locals would stop by, leave flowers or teddy bears, and wonder what really happened that day. And then, something strange. One quiet morning in early spring, a fisherman named Carl Mitchell was out early, casting his line into the cool water of Stillwater. Carl was a retired school teacher, a man who had fished that lake for decades and knew its every curve and shadow. He was out alone, just like always, bundled in layers and sipping hot coffee from a dented thermos. The lake was still, almost too still. The kind of stillness that makes you feel like something's watching. Carl had just started packing up when something bobbing near the reeds caught his eye. At first, he thought it was debris, a piece of driftwood or an old tire. But as he got closer, the shape became clearer. It wasn't driftwood. It was a small, worn-out life jacket, half submerged and tangled in weeds. The jacket was bright pink and covered in faded cartoon characters. Carl's heart dropped. He remembered Lily Harper wore one just like it. Every parent in town knew it. It had been a gift from Emily's sister and had Lily's name written in black marker on the inside flap. Carl reached out with his fishing net, carefully pulling the jacket closer. When he turned it over, the name was still there. Lily H. Suddenly, that quiet lake didn't feel so peaceful anymore. Carl called the sheriff's department immediately, and within hours, investigators were back at Stillwater. The media caught wind of it, and soon cameras were pointed back at the lake that everyone had almost forgotten. But it wasn't just the life jacket that brought them back. It was what happened next that truly sent chills through everyone involved. Divers were called in again, hoping the jacket's location might lead them somewhere new. They returned to the water that had swallowed Emily and Lily whole. But this time, the equipment picked up something strange on the sonar. Not a body, not a boat, something else. Something no one could explain. As divers went down, what they found left them shaken. Just beyond the lake bed, Tucked inside a small underwater cave they hadn't found in earlier searches was a collection of objects. A child's bracelet, a waterproof camera, and something else, a small bundle wrapped, because what investigators found on that camera changes everything. The camera was old, scratched, and coated with a thin layer of silt, but somehow still intact. It had been protected inside a waterproof bag, sealed tight. Investigators handled it like it was made of glass. Every move was careful, deliberate. The bag was opened in a controlled room, the contents dried, and the memory card extracted with tweezers. No one knew what they'd find, if anything would still be readable after 8 months underwater, but everyone hoped for something. A clue, a message, a sliver of truth. Back at the station, Detective Marla Reyes watched the technician load the card. She'd been on the original case from day one and had walked that lake's edge until her boots fell apart. Emily's disappearance had haunted her, not just because it was a high-profile case, but because Emily had been her neighbor once. They weren't close, but they exchanged smiles, small talk, and once shared a cab when their cars broke down in the same week. Marla had watched Lily grow up from a toddler playing in the sprinklers to a curious little girl who always had her nose in a book. Losing them hit her in a way that was hard to explain. And not finding them? That was worse. The first few files on the camera were normal photos of Emily and Lily smiling on the shore, their fishing poles resting on a small rock, a lunch spread out on a blanket. In one picture, Lily held up a fish, her face scrunched in disgust while Emily laughed behind her. There were short videos, too. Emily talking about how peaceful the lake was. Lily complaining about bug bites. Nothing unusual until the last few clips. One of the final videos, shot shakily as if the camera had been grabbed quickly, showed the water suddenly turning choppy. The sky looked darker, the wind louder. You could hear Emily's voice calling Lily's name over and over. Then the camera jerked, falling, it seemed, and landed sideways on the ground. It kept recording. For several minutes, there was nothing but the sound of water and faint shouting in the distance. Then silence. The screen went black. But then, another file loaded. This one was shorter, only 12 seconds. And in those 12 seconds, the camera was pointed inside a dim, echoey space. Maybe a cave. Maybe something else. The only light came from the camera's own red recording indicator, and it barely lit anything. But in the background, there was a sound. A soft whisper. A voice, maybe Lily's, saying something too low to understand. Then the video cut out. Detective Reyes played it a dozen times, slowing it down, adjusting the audio, trying to catch every detail. No one could explain how the camera ended up inside a cave, or why it was wrapped up carefully, hidden in a place that took professional divers days to locate. There were theories, of course, but none of them made sense. Meanwhile, word spread like wildfire. News stations ran headlines like "Mysterious Camera Found in Lake Where Mother and Daughter Vanished." Online forums lit up with speculation. Some claimed it was all a cover-up. Others suggested strange currents in Stillwater Lake, undocumented sinkholes, underwater caves that open and close with the seasons. Some even went further, bringing up old folklore. Because Stillwater Lake wasn't just a body of water. To locals, it carried stories, strange ones. There were whispers that the lake had taken people before. A teenager in the 90s who went swimming and was never found. A fisherman in 2007 who sent a final, cryptic text before his boat washed up empty. Most wrote these off as accidents. But after Emily and Lily, people started to wonder if there was more. An elderly man named Harold Yates, who'd lived near the lake his entire life, came forward with a memory. He said that when he was a boy, his grandfather told him never to fish near the eastern edge of the lake, where the woods came in thick and the water turned darker. He remembered the stories about how sometimes the lake didn't like to give things back. "It's a place that remembers," his grandfather used to say. At the time, it sounded like nonsense. Now, it felt like something worth listening to. Carl, the fisherman who found the life jacket, avoided the press, but he gave one quiet interview to a local reporter. He said he hadn't planned to go out that day. Something just told him to. He said he didn't feel alone on the water, that there was something strange in the air, like the lake was waiting. When he found the life jacket, he swore he heard something, faint, like laughter, or maybe crying. He said it didn't sound human, but he wouldn't say more. As the investigation continued, more pieces started to surface, literally. A child's shoe, a broken pair of sunglasses. None of these items were found near each other. It was like the lake was slowly returning them, one at a time, as if deciding when and what to reveal. And always near the same area, the eastern edge, where the trees cast long shadows and the water ran unusually deep. Emily's sister, Sarah, became a familiar face in the news. She spoke softly in interviews, always holding a picture of Lily in her hand. She refused to believe her sister and niece were just gone. Emily would never let anything happen to Lily, she said. If they're not with us, something else must have happened. Something we don't understand. Despite the new leads, the official report remained unchanged. Missing, presumed drowned. But no bodies had ever been recovered. No sign of trauma. No final message. And that, more than anything, kept the mystery alive. Back at the police station, Detective Reyes asked the team to remap the entire eastern section of the lake. New sonar readings revealed a narrow crevice that hadn't been picked up before. It ran deep, deeper than expected. When the divers went back down, they noted something strange. A sudden drop, followed by a perfectly smooth wall of stone. Too smooth, almost unnatural. They couldn't explain it. One diver, his name was Ben, came back up after his second dive, pale and shaking. He said he thought he saw movement below, like a shadow darting just beyond his light. He said he heard a voice over his headset, one that didn't come from the team above. A voice that whispered his name. When asked to go down again, Ben refused. Whatever happened to Emily and Lily that day hadn't been a simple accident. That much was clear now. The camera proved they'd been alive, possibly even after the first day. But where they went and how was still a mystery. A growing one. One that seemed to go deeper than the lake itself. Stillwater Lake wasn't talking, but it was watching, and it had more to show. For days after the discovery of the strange underwater crevice, things didn't feel right in town. People who lived near Stillwater Lake started locking their doors earlier. Some stopped going out on the water altogether. It wasn't fear of an accident. It was something else. Something they couldn't name. The lake, once a quiet retreat, now felt like a presence. Something that watched. Something that waited. Detective Marla Reyes didn't like superstition, but she couldn't ignore the feeling either. She'd started having dreams. Always the same. A dense fog rolling over the lake, the sound of Lily calling out, and a glimpse of something in the water that didn't belong. Every morning, she woke up before dawn, heart racing, drenched in sweat. At first, she told herself it was stress. That's all. But when she learned that 2 other members of the dive team had also been waking up at the exact same time, with dreams they couldn't explain, her doubts started to crack. Meanwhile, Sarah, Emily's sister, started digging into the past. She spent hours at the local library, going through old newspapers, land records, anything tied to Stillwater Lake. That's when she found something strange, a series of missing person reports, all within a 10-mile radius of the lake, dating back over 70 years. Most of the cases had faded into obscurity, written off as drownings, accidents, runaways. But the pattern was hard to ignore. Many of the missing had been last seen near the eastern edge of the lake, the same place Emily and Lily disappeared. One case stood out to Sarah. A woman named Ruth Carver, who vanished with her son in 1974. They'd gone for a walk near the lake and never returned. Only her scarf was found, tangled in a tree branch by the water's edge. Sarah tracked down Ruth's niece, now in her 60s, living 2 towns over. When they spoke, the woman's hands shook as she poured tea. She said Ruth had told her stories about the lake, about how it reflected things that weren't really there, and how, as a child, she'd seen faces in the water. My aunt always said the lake remembers, the woman said. It pulls you in, and it shows you what it wants you to see. Sarah recorded the conversation and sent it to Marla. Neither of them said it out loud, But both felt the same thing. This wasn't just a disappearance. It was a pattern, a cycle, something deeper. Back at the lake, strange things continued to happen. Campers near the shore reported hearing voices at night, soft and muffled, like they were underwater. One man claimed he saw a small figure walking along the edge of the water at dawn. He thought it was a child, but when he got closer, there was nothing there. Another reported his fishing gear disappearing from his boat overnight, only to reappear 2 days later, perfectly arranged, as if someone had cleaned it. Even Carl, the fisherman who had first spotted Lily's life jacket, found himself drawn back to the water despite everything. He didn't want to go. He swore he wouldn't. But something pulled at him. He told his wife he was going to the hardware store, then drove out to Stillwater Lake instead. He sat at the dock, staring out at the water, not moving. When he finally returned home hours later, he couldn't remember how the time passed. He hadn't brought a rod. He didn't fish. He just sat there, watching. As the tension around the lake grew, so did the media attention. A team from a popular true crime podcast arrived in town, hoping to dig into the mystery. They interviewed everyone, locals, the dive team, Sarah. One of the hosts, a woman named Tessa, was particularly curious about the last video on the recovered camera. She asked Marla if the voice in the background had been analyzed. Marla admitted they hadn't been able to make out the words. So Tessa sent the file to an independent audio engineer. What came back was disturbing. After hours of enhancing the audio, slowing it down, filtering out the water noise, the voice became clearer. It wasn't just whispering, it was repeating something. Over and over. 5 words. We're still down here. Waiting. The voice wasn't frantic. It wasn't scared. It was calm. Steady. Some even said it sounded like Lily. When the clip was played during the podcast's newest episode, the internet exploded. Theories flooded every corner of social media. Some said it was proof of a supernatural event. Others believed Emily and Lily had been trapped, maybe injured, surviving for days before they were finally lost. But no one could explain how a child's voice would end up recorded so deep in the lake, days after the search had already begun. The dive team went back again, despite the growing discomfort among them. This time, they brought specialized equipment, a remotely operated vehicle, or ROV, fitted with cameras and sonar. They sent it down into the deep crevice near the eastern ridge. It took nearly an hour to reach the floor. What the camera saw down there confused everyone. The walls of the crevice were unusually smooth, like something had worn them down over time. Not jagged rock, but something polished. The RV's lights flickered, then steadied. And then it caught something in the distance. A flicker. Movement. A glint of something metallic, something man-made. But before they could get closer, the camera cut out. Total black. When they pulled the RV up, its outer casing was damaged. Scratched. Almost like claw marks. No one wanted to say what they were thinking. That something might be alive down there. Or worse, that something didn't want to be found. With each passing day, the pressure mounted. Marla found herself staring at maps of the lake late into the night. Sarah kept calling, convinced they were close to a breakthrough. But what kind of breakthrough? And what would they do with it? Even if they uncovered the truth, what if no one believed them? What if no one wanted to? Stillwater Lake had always kept its secrets. And now, it felt like it was choosing which ones to reveal and when. But the lake wasn't done yet. Not even close. The town of Stillwater felt different now. Quieter, like it was holding its breath. Word of the damaged ROV spread quickly, and with it, a growing sense of dread. People stopped visiting the lake altogether. Stores that once sold bait and tackle started stocking candles and flashlights instead. Even the most skeptical folks began to look over their shoulders when they drove past the water. Something was building, and everyone felt it, even if they couldn't explain what it was. Detective Marla Reyes was running on fumes. Sleep didn't come easily anymore. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the footage, the smooth stone, the glint of something just out of reach, and the scratches on the RV when they brought it back up. She started keeping her radio on all night, even though she wasn't on shift. A part of her was waiting, hoping for something, but dreading it at the same time. Sarah was worse. Driven by obsession, she'd stopped going to work. Her apartment was littered with maps, newspaper clippings, and photos of Emily and Lily. She barely ate, barely spoke. The only thing that kept her moving was the hope that somewhere, somehow, her sister and niece were still out there, alive or not. She needed to bring them home. Closure had become a mission. But with every new piece of evidence, that goal felt further away. A storm rolled in one evening, fast and violent. Trees bent under the wind, and lightning turned the lake's surface silver. The water churned like something underneath was trying to rise. That same night, a retired park ranger named Tom Belton called the police. He lived alone in a cabin near the eastern ridge. His voice on the call was shaky. He said he saw something out on the water, 2 figures, walking across the lake's surface. Not boating, walking. He swore they were holding hands. When officers arrived, there was no one there. No footprints. No sign of anything. But Tom insisted. He'd seen them clear as day, a woman with long dark hair and a little girl beside her. It was Emily and Lily, he said. I don't care how crazy it sounds. It was them. The next morning, Marla went back to the ridge. She stood near the trees, the ones Sarah had marked on her map so many times. There was something strange about that spot. The air was colder. The ground felt hollow, like there was space just beneath the surface. She looked out across the lake and saw nothing but still water. But still, her gut told her something was watching. And not just her. Everyone. Back in town, the podcast crew prepared for one last recording. Tessa and her team were planning to release a full-length special, compiling everything they'd found. But Tessa wasn't finished yet. She wanted one more trip out to the lake. Against her team's protests, she insisted on going out at night, just her and a drone operator named Nate. They launched the drone from a dock near the eastern ridge, letting it rise above the water, sweeping the camera slowly back and forth. Everything looked normal at first, but then Nate pointed something out on the screen. A dark shape, just beneath the surface. Not a boat, not a rock. Something else. Something moving. Tessa leaned in. The shape shifted, then vanished. Seconds later, the drone's signal went dead. They both froze. Nate tried rebooting the controller, but nothing worked. The drone had disappeared. The lake was silent again, like it had swallowed the whole thing without a ripple. That footage never made it to air. Not all of it. Later that night, Tessa returned to her hotel room and found a small, water-damaged envelope slipped under her door. No name, no return address. Inside was a photograph, grainy and old, but clearly showing the same ridge, the same lake. In the photo stood a woman and child, faces blurred, but hauntingly familiar. On the back, someone had written, "She's trying to come back, but something won't let her." The next morning, Marla called Sarah and asked to meet. They sat on a bench near the lake, the sky overcast, the water still. Marla told her about the photo, about the drone, about everything. Sarah listened quietly, her hands clenched tight in her lap. Then she pulled out a notebook she hadn't shown anyone yet. Inside were pages of dreams she'd recorded. Vivid, repeating images. A staircase beneath the water. A door made of stone. A whisper calling her name. Not her sister's, not Lily's, but her own. Sarah believed the lake was holding them. Not just physically, but in some strange, impossible way. Like it had taken their presence, their memories, and trapped them in its depths. If she's trying to come back, Sarah said, then I have to help her. That evening, Sarah returned to the eastern ridge alone. She carried nothing but a flashlight and a photo of Emily and Lily. The wind had picked up again. The trees groaned. The water lapped against the shore like a slow, heavy breath. She walked to the edge and whispered her sister's name. Nothing. Then she took a step into the water. Behind her, hidden in the woods, Marla watched. She'd followed Sarah, worried she might do something desperate. But what she saw shook her to her core. The water around Sarah began to ripple, though there was no wind on the surface. A low hum filled the air, like a distant echo rising from the depths. Sarah stood frozen, flashlight shaking in her hand. And then movement. From beneath the surface, something started to rise. Slow, dark, shapeless. Not a body, not a boat. A form, too large to be natural, yet not solid either, like a shadow given weight. Sarah stumbled back, but her feet stuck in the soft mud. The water reached her knees. Marla yelled, breaking from the trees. She ran toward her, but the lake reacted. The water surged upward, not like a wave, but like a wall. A shape passed between them, just beneath the surface. It moved too fast to follow. Sarah screamed, falling backward as her flashlight slipped from her hand and vanished beneath the water. Marla reached her just in time, grabbing her arm and pulling her back toward shore. The shape didn't follow. The water calmed instantly, as if nothing had happened. They both sat in the dirt, soaked and shaking, staring at the still lake. Sarah turned to Marla, her voice trembling. "It's not just hiding them," she said. "It's using them, keeping them between worlds." And in that moment, Marla realized this mystery wasn't going to be solved with logic or evidence. This lake, Stillwater Lake, was something else. Something that remembered pain. Something that fed on it. They'd come looking for answers. But what if the lake had only ever wanted witnesses? And what if, now, it had chosen them? The night after Sarah nearly disappeared into the lake, the air in Stillwater felt heavier. Even the birds were silent. A storm had passed, but the tension in the town hadn't. People whispered about what had happened, how the detective had dragged a woman screaming from the water, how the surface of the lake had risen like it was alive. And then came the twist no one expected. The town's water supply, fed directly from Stillwater Lake, suddenly turned murky. Homes near the lake began to report odd smells coming from their taps. Metallic, earthy. Some even said it smelled like old flowers. At first, authorities blamed sediment stirred up by the recent storms. But it wasn't just the smell. There were things in the water. Bits of cloth. A gold necklace. What looked like a child's shoe, water-worn and tangled in weeds. Marla had the items sent to the lab. But when she saw the necklace up close, her heart dropped. She'd seen it before, in photos Sarah had shown her. It was Lily's. A tiny locket with her name engraved inside. And now it had somehow surfaced through the town's water pipes. That changed everything. If the lake was pulling things in, why was it now spitting them back out? Sarah couldn't stop thinking about what had happened on the shore. The figure in the water, the pressure in the air, the whisper in her ear just before Marla grabbed her. It hadn't been her sister. It had been a child's voice. "You're not supposed to be here," it had said. She started wondering if maybe Lily was trying to protect her, or warn her. And if that was true, then something else was the danger. Sarah returned to her sister's house, now empty and untouched since Emily and Lily had gone missing. She hadn't been able to go back inside since that day, but now she needed to. She walked through the quiet room slowly, hands grazing walls, shelves, photographs. Then she noticed something odd. Emily's laptop was still on the dining table. It had been dead when the police searched the house, but Sarah plugged it in and waited. The screen flickered on, and everything looked normal until she opened the photo folder. Dozens of pictures of Lily fishing, laughing, running along the lake shore. But the last file in the folder was a video. One Emily had taken, timestamped the day before they vanished. In the video, Emily and Lily were walking along the ridge. Emily was talking about the weather, but Lily kept glancing toward the trees. "She's following us again," Lily said softly. Emily asked who she meant. Lily just pointed behind them and whispered, "The lady in the water." Sarah paused the video. Her skin prickled. It wasn't the first time Lily had mentioned something like this. Sarah remembered a phone call, maybe a week before they disappeared. Emily had said Lily had been having nightmares, drawing pictures of a woman with long arms and no face. Sarah had chalked it up to a child's imagination. Now she wasn't so sure. Marla brought in a specialist, an old contact from her early days in the force, a former forensic analyst turned private researcher named David Lynn. He had experience in unconventional investigations. When he arrived, he wasn't surprised by the story. He'd heard things like it before. Places where time didn't behave normally. Locations that seemed to remember sorrow like a scent in the air. He didn't dismiss what Sarah and Marla had seen. In fact, he leaned into it. David had a theory. He believed Stillwater Lake wasn't just a body of water. It was a threshold, a place where the line between the living and the lost thinned. But unlike haunted houses or cemeteries, Stillwater was active, alive in a way no one had really understood. It's not about ghosts, he told them. It's about memory. Something here is holding on to what it shouldn't. That night, David set up sensors around the lake's eastern ridge. Heat monitors, sound detectors, a special camera rig that captured near-infrared movement. They waited until midnight, when the lake was at its quietest. And then, something happened. The sound monitors picked up a low, rhythmic tone, like a heartbeat. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in seconds. On one of the infrared cameras, they saw a figure standing at the water's edge, tall, unmoving, with no clear features. And then it stepped into the water and vanished. David played the footage over and over. "That's not a shadow," he said. "That's someone. Or something." But no one could explain how it got there, or why the cameras at every other angle saw nothing. The next morning, a letter was found on the doorstep of the ranger station. It was damp, being slightly smudged. No envelope, just folded parchment. Inside were 2 lines written in trembling script. "You're looking in the wrong direction. What lies beneath was never buried." David examined the paper. It was old. The fibers looked decades aged, as if it had been written long ago and preserved somehow. But the handwriting? It matched a note Emily had once left on her fridge. Sarah recognized it instantly. Had Emily written the message? Was she trying to help them now, from wherever she was? The lake was changing. That much was clear. Animals were avoiding it. Boats left docked overnight were found drifting aimlessly the next morning, their engines dead or missing. People began hearing footsteps outside their cabins late at night, only to open their doors and find water stains on the floor, but no one there. And then came the second twist, perhaps the most terrifying one yet. A man named Kyle Morgan showed up at the sheriff's office. He claimed his daughter had gone missing 2 days ago. Her name was Hannah, 7 years old. Last seen riding her bike near the trail behind Stillwater Elementary. Kyle wasn't from town. He was just visiting family. But when they checked the missing person report, something strange happened. The system flagged it, because Hannah Morgan had already been reported missing. 8 years ago. Different parents. Same name. Same description. Same birthday. Marla stared at the file. This wasn't a mistake. It was like the same child had disappeared twice, under 2 completely separate circumstances, in 2 different decades. And both cases were linked to Stillwater Lake. David's voice was grave as he read through the data. "This place isn't just trapping people," he said. "It's repeating them, echoing them, playing the same tragedies over and over again." Marla felt a chill that wouldn't go away. What if the lake wasn't just holding on to Emily and Lily? What if it was rewriting them? Somewhere deep beneath the surface, something stirred. Something old. Something that had learned how to mimic the pain it absorbed. And now, the line between who was real and who had been taken was starting to blur. And whatever was down there, whatever was waiting, was almost ready to come up. The lake was quiet the night they decided to go back. Not peaceful, just still, like the calm before something inevitable. Sarah, Marla, and David stood at the edge of the eastern ridge, looking out over the dark water. They didn't talk much. The time for questions was over. All that was left was action, even if none of them were entirely sure what they were stepping into. David had pieced together enough of the lake's history to believe there was a pattern, something ancient and repetitive, tied to memory, tragedy, and loss. He believed the only way to break the cycle was to confront it directly. And Sarah, despite everything, believed her sister and niece were still trapped somewhere within it. Not alive, not gone, but suspended in the lake's impossible grasp. They waited until the moon was high and the fog started to roll in. That's when they launched the modified ROV, a new version built by David's tech team, equipped with infrared, sonar, and a signal beacon that would keep transmitting even if something tried to block it. As it sank into the dark water, Sarah held onto the control box, watching the screen as murky shapes flickered past. Down it went, deeper than before, past the point where the first ROV had been shredded, past the shelf where they thought the remains had been buried. At about 300 feet, the signal wavered but held. And then they saw something. A shape, not man-made. It looked like stone but was too smooth, too deliberate. A circle, carved symbols around the edge. And in the center, an opening. The ROV hovered there, its lights catching on something inside the hollow. There were figures, not just debris, not just shadows. They were human shapes, still, suspended like statues, but their clothes moved slightly in the current. Two smaller figures stood near the back, holding hands. Sarah froze. "It's them," she whispered. "It's Emily and Lily." Marla leaned in. "But they're not moving." David's face turned pale. "That's not all." In the feed, behind the figures, something shifted. The water blurred. A black shape loomed, tall, stretched, and formless. Like it had no face. Like it wore the lake itself as skin. The feed cut out. The control box sparked and went dead. The ROV was lost again. But this time, it didn't matter. The lake began to churn, slowly at first, then violently. Waves slapped the shoreline. Wind rose from nowhere. The temperature dropped like a door had opened somewhere deep below. And then, the screaming started. Not human, not natural, but layered. Hundreds of voices, overlapping, crying out from beneath the surface. Names. Please. Laughter twisted into sobs. Sarah fell to her knees, clutching her ears. Marla grabbed her, pulling her back. David shouted something, but it was lost in the wind. The lake erupted. A column of water shot into the sky like a geyser, and something rose with it. Not a person, not a creature, but a shape vague, impossible. A being made of memory and pain and all the things the lake had swallowed. It didn't move like it belonged in the world. It pulsed. It remembered. Sarah stood, eyes locked on it. Her voice was steady. "You have them. Give them back." The shape shuddered. She stepped forward. "You've taken too much. You've held on too long." The ground shook. The lake surface began to collapse inward, like a whirlpool was forming. Trees bent backward, pulled toward the center. And then another sound broke through. Softer, clearer. A child's voice. "Sarah." It came from behind them. They turned. There, standing in the trees, was Lily. Soaked, shivering, but real. Emily stood beside her, dazed, her eyes wide and blinking in the moonlight. Both of them were covered in mud and lake weed, but breathing. Solid. Marla ran forward, wrapping her jacket around Lily. David reached for Emily, guiding her away. Sarah could barely stand. Tears poured down her face as she ran to her sister and niece. Emily's voice was weak. "It let us go." Sarah looked back toward the lake. The shape was collapsing into itself, as if releasing them had taken its strength. The whirlpool faded. The wind calmed. And just like that, it was still again. But just as the group turned to leave, thinking it was over, David noticed something in the water. A second Lily, standing ankle-deep near the shore. Not moving, not breathing, just watching. Then, without warning, she stepped backward into the lake and vanished beneath the surface. David stared. What was that? Sarah held the real Lily tighter, who was quietly crying into her shoulder. Emily whispered. The lake made a copy. The final twist hit them like a wave. It hadn't just been holding people, it had been learning them, creating echoes, versions, maybe not whole, maybe not alive, but enough to fool, enough to replace. The necklace, the drawings, the photograph, even the sightings, some hadn't been real at all. Just shadows the lake had tried to pass off as truth. It had let go of Emily and Lily. But the others? The ones no one knew were missing? The ones it had duplicated and buried under time? Still there, still waiting. They left Stillwater that night. Emily and Lily were taken to a hospital, treated for hypothermia and exhaustion. The doctors couldn't explain how they were alive, much less where they'd been. Emily refused to talk. Lily barely spoke above a whisper. Marla filed her final report with the simplest words she could manage. Found alive. Cause unknown. She left out the rest. David disappeared not long after. Left town without a word. But he mailed Sarah a package weeks later. Inside was a hard drive, with one message typed out on a sticky note. Watch the last file. You won't believe who else is down there. Sarah never opened it. She kept it in a drawer, unopened, along with the original missing persons reports for people no one talked about anymore. She knew if she watched it, she'd never sleep again. Stillwater Lake was sealed off by local officials soon after. A fence, warnings, no trespassing signs. But some still go there at night, hoping to see something, hoping not to. Sarah took her sister and niece far from town. They bought a small house inland. No lakes, no ponds, no water deeper than a bathtub. But even now, sometimes, Lily wakes in the middle of the night and says, "The other me is still calling," because the lake may let you go, but it never really gives you back. Weeks passed, and the chaos that once surrounded Stillwater Lake slowly faded into quiet memory for most of the town. But for Sarah, Emily, and little Lily, the aftermath was something they lived through every day. The world around them returned to normal, schools reopened, families went back to weekend barbecues, and the news moved on to other stories. But the scars left behind by the lake's secrets didn't heal so easily. Emily struggled with sleep. She often woke drenched in sweat, haunted by dreams she couldn't explain. Sometimes she'd forget where she was and look around, confused, expecting to see the water stretching out before her again. She'd find herself clutching Lily in the middle of the night, whispering that everything was okay, even when she wasn't sure she believed it. Her memories of the time they were gone remained cloudy. There were flashes, an endless underwater corridor, voices that echoed like whine through hollow bones, shadows that moved without light. But when she tried to piece it together, it all slipped away, like sand through her fingers. Lily, too, had changed. She'd always been imaginative, full of energy, always drawing and asking questions. But now she was quiet, watchful. She stuck close to her mom, rarely going more than a few feet away. At school, she sat by the window and stared outside for long stretches. When her teacher asked what she was looking at, Lily just shrugged and said, "I'm listening." But she never said to what. Sarah tried to bring some normalcy back. She kept them busy, baking, long drives, planting a small garden behind the house. She thought time and distance would help them forget, or at least soften the edges. But the more she tried to ignore it, the more she realized that some stories don't just end. They settle in the bones, quietly changing the way a person moves through the world. Sarah kept the package David had sent tucked away in her drawer, unopened. A part of her wanted answers. Another part knew she probably already had them, and that knowing more would come with a price. Marla left the force not long after. She told the town she needed time with family, maybe a break before retirement. But Sarah knew the truth. Marla had seen something she couldn't explain, something no amount of training had prepared her for. And she knew there were things she couldn't protect people from. They met for coffee once before Marla left. She didn't bring up the lake. She didn't have to. The silence between them said enough. As for the lake itself, it was officially closed off due to environmental instability. Fences were put up, signs posted, patrols increased. The local news mentioned rising concerns about groundwater contamination and a few vague references to unusual findings. But no one talked about what had really happened. The footage from the RV remained sealed, filed away as inconclusive. David never returned. His email went dark, and even the number Sarah had for him stopped working. It was as if he'd vanished into thin air. But Stillwater Lake didn't forget. On quiet nights, some locals claimed to see ripples on its surface, even when there was no wind. A few reported hearing laughter near the shoreline, though no one was there. One man, out walking his dog, swore he saw a little girl standing ankle-deep in the water, staring, unmoving, until she disappeared without a sound. Stories kept surfacing. Some brushed them off as rumors, leftover fear from a town too long haunted by what had happened. But others believed, and stayed away. One afternoon, months later, Sarah sat beside Lily in the garden. They were planting wildflowers, something colorful, something alive. Lily dug quietly, focused on the earth. Then, without looking up, she said, "She's not coming back, you know." Sarah paused. "Who?" Lily looked at her. "The other me." A chill passed through Sarah, but she nodded. "That's good," she said gently. "You're the only you I want around." Lily smiled, just a little. Then she looked toward the woods behind the house. but she watches. Just in case. Sarah didn't know what that meant, and she didn't ask. Some things didn't need answers. Some stories needed to close themselves, not be pried open. That night, as they all sat down for dinner, Emily reached for Sarah's hand and gave it a soft squeeze. Her voice was steadier now. "I think we're going to be okay," she said. "It's just different now." Sarah smiled. "Different's all right." And in that moment, the house felt safe, quiet, whole. They never went back to the lake. Not even to visit. They didn't need to. What they carried from it wasn't something that could be left behind. But they moved forward together. And slowly, day by day, the fear gave way to something else. Not peace, not exactly, but acceptance. Stillwater Lake still exists. It still lies just beyond the tree line, still and unspoken. The fence around it rusts slowly, the signs fade. And every now and then, someone gets too close. Hears something. Sees something they can't explain. But most keep their distance, not because of rules, because of memory, because of the stories. And in the end, that's what remains. A place where time paused, where something impossible happened. A story of a girl and her mom who were lost and found in the heart of a mystery no one can fully understand. A story that, like the lake itself, is never quite finished.